So thanks everyone for joining us today in our dev track session. Breaking up is hard to do, splitting up a multi-site setup. My name's Tim Hoppe. I'm a project manager for Creative Arc in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'll be moderating for you today. I will be following the hop-in chat feature to track questions that are not being answered during the presentation, and I'll try to make sure that we get to them at the end if there's time. Also reiterating the comments in the keynote or in the opening speech by TJ, please be patient. If COVID has taught us anything, it's that there are going to be some issues, and we're here as a community to share our EE experience. So please have faith that we're doing our best to, in the circumstances, to do that. Okay, now for the good stuff. Let me introduce you, Travis Smith. I was lucky enough to meet Travis at the EEConf in Minneapolis in real life last year, and I found him to be engaging and interesting. His CV is quite impressive, so you can go to the Hob Studios website to find links to his LinkedIn profile, his photo galleries on Flickr, and blog posts and blog posts on his website unvarnished.
No. Okay. All right, I'm out of here.
Yeah. He's a big fan of the ultimate frisbee. Like, I mean, a big fan. So if you check out his volunteer experience on LinkedIn for the full experience of like all the things that he does. He also likes fighting for a free and open internet, which I thought was pretty cool. But the most amazing thing I found while snooping around for this intro was that he was a very precocious child. His first blog post was from 1972, and it reads, "Hello world, just arrived, too tired to write much today. I'm gonna go grab a snack and a nap." With that, I give you Travis Smith.
Wow. I don't think anyone's ever gone that far back in my blog archives before, Tim. Thank you very much for the intro. That's hilarious. I'd actually forgotten about that. Yeah. Wow. I'm kind of off balance now, but thank you. Yeah, I'm here today to talk about how you split up an MSM setup that you might have gotten yourself into, and we'll kind of go in from there. So it's as we noted, it is definitely kind of an uncertain time here on the planet. But I definitely want to start by thanking the organizers. Their dedication made this event happen virtually. They are taking on all these problems and solving all these hurdles of switching formats, and none of them are doing EE conference full time. They all have busy lives. So I just wanted to say, I think we should all say thank you. They really do a tremendous service for the EE community. And they really, Tom mentioned this. I think that the conference organizers set the tone for the whole community, and the generosity that we share. So, thank you to them. I'm also here to be a little bit generous with this community. I'm going to tell you about things we learned during some work we were doing on a mega project. We had to separate 7 sites that were all running from one install into 3 sites that were each running from a separate installation. And I'm going to tell you about the things we learned while working on it that hopefully you can use if you need to separate MSM. And I hope that you take what you learn here and pay it forward, and go ahead and give your lessons back to the community too. It's what makes this particular CMS such a pleasure to work on. In fact, I'm gonna digress. Somebody's seen me do a presentation before. They know that I digress occasionally. Expression Engine has this thing called Expression Engine University.
One note, Travis.
Yes.
Right now you're not presenting. We can see all the tiles. If you want.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine.
Just want to make sure. Okay.
No, I appreciate that. There's no surprises. Though actually, I need to reorder these because I missed one of my slides already. So Tom actually mentioned this in his in the keynote, and I was super thrilled with this. So Expression Engine has this thing called Expression Engine University. Has anyone heard of it or used it or even contributed to it? The URL for it is really catchy. It's just u.expressionengine.com. And I totally recommend going and checking it out. There's all sorts of good things there. I'm going to put this talk into Expression Engine University if they'll have it. You know, I encourage you to definitely check it out during someone else's session. It's got a whole bunch of good stuff. I'm also going to jump back to this slide, and I'm going to post this in the chat. So my whole talk I did as a Google Doc, and you can go to it, read it, you can edit it. You know, if I make a mistake, you can correct me there. You know, you're welcome to jump in. I know some people absorb information a little bit better when it's words instead of speaking, so that's for you to enjoy as well. All right, so who's Hob Studios? Just quick intro. We're a company of 8 people. We're based in Canada. We're fully virtual now. We gave up our office in August. Thank you, COVID. We build websites for clients with demanding, you know, adventurous support needs. And the majority of our clients are social enterprises or other sorts of nonprofits, community serving organizations. You know, we try to do good in the world ourselves by helping better organizations. You know, we want to build excellent websites for them. I started the company in 2004 with my wife at the time, and from the very beginning, we were, you know, Expression Engine users ourselves, and then, you know, we used it as a tool. It's funny. I'm seeing notes. I keep asking questions of the audience, but you guys can't. I can't see your hands go up. How many of you have been using Expression Engine for more than 10 years? All right. So, what is MSM? What is Multiple Site Manager? This was introduced in 2007. Expression Engine 1.6 was released in June 2007, at the exact same time as the original iPhone. Actually, Multiple Site Manager was almost as exciting as the new iPhone, and it was just one of the new features in Expression Engine 1.6. The keynote today, I digress. The keynote today really, I felt, captured a little bit of that excitement from, you know, EE 1.6, EE 2, 2.4, EE 2.6. You know, there was new features and new excitement coming out all the time, and Multi-Site Manager was part of that. Multi-Site Manager empowered you to create and manage multiple websites from a single Expression Engine installation. These sites could use your existing domain or subdomain or a combination of the above. The requirements were really simple. You just needed to have 1.6. You had to have all your sites on the same server, which most of us did. And you, as the license holder, had to be the owner of all the sites. The general reaction from pretty much everybody was, oh, we can use this. A lot of developers I knew tried it out soon after it launched for a couple of reasons. It was easy to update, we thought, you know, because you just have to update your code base once, and that updates all the sites that are running off of it. It was cheaper because you could buy an MSM license for cheaper than a standalone EE license. I think this was actually a major mistake in retrospect on the part of LS Lab. I don't criticize them for it, but I think that well, I won't get into why, but you know, that was certainly a reason for people to try MSM. The other big reason was that you would have one login, and it would apply to a bunch of sites. So developers and administrators who were running a bunch of sites thought that that would be, you know, much simpler to handle. Again, kind of a thing that turned out not to be true in terms of simplicity, but a lot of people were attracted to it. So did MSM work in those cases? Kind of, not really. The list of modules that were originally made multiple site aware was pretty short. Channel, comment, RSS, and stats in 1.6. And then, and there were some engine things underneath that I'll get to in a sec. Later, they realized they had to add search to that list because you wanted to be able to search across multiple sites. Within, you know, so, you know, at launch, it was a little rocky. Does MSM still work now? It does, but I want to talk about the details because I think part of understanding how to split up a site is understanding why you might need to split up a site. MSM is conceptually is this idea that Expression Engine itself is a cross-site platform, and then on top of that, certain things are site-specific, and other things are, other things are across all the sites. So member accounts, you have a single member account that exists across all the sites. Member groups also exist across all sites. However, a member can only be in one group regardless of the site. This might all be changing in EE6, but this is how it was. But interestingly, member group permissions varied per site. So if you were in a member group called photographers, on site 1, photographers might have some permissions, and on site 2, it might have different permissions. And those permissions are not just relating to that site, but they're actually relating to Expression Engine itself. So you can have, if you log in on one site, you can have like a ton of permissions. And if you log in on another site, you can be locked out of those same permissions. It's kind of a thing to kind of twist your head around, that you would have permissions, but only if you came in through a particular door. For example, you could have permissions on one site to switch to other sites, but you could have that permission removed on a different site. Channel fields were always per site until EE4, and then it switched to channel fields becoming available across all sites when you created them. But if you upgraded from EE2, the old fields were only available per site. So there's just some things in there that were, a little confusing and messy when you actually put it into practice. So, what did MSM turn out to be for? The best sort of usage scenario that I would come up with was when you had a series of sites that were like mostly cookie cutter, especially where some content is going to get used across those sites, but a lot of the content wasn't. So if you had like a series of sites for different cities, and each city was going to have, a sports league site, and you wanted it to be kind of a clone, but those sites weren't interacting with each other much, except for things like maybe the privacy policy or a contact us form or things like that. That was kind of a best case scenario for MSM. You're keeping everything kind of the same, but you wanted some things separate. But really in the real world, that's a pretty rare scenario. What if you and your business partner decide to split up your multi-city sports league site? Or what if one site becomes super successful and in another city, there's no money to support the site, and so you end up wanting to develop one site, but the other site also needs to be developed so that they stay in sync. What if both sites become so popular that you want to put them on different servers to handle the load? Or what if one of your sites, you have an add-on that only works in EE4 and above, but the other site still relies on an add-on that has never been upgraded for EE3, So these are kind of the problems with multi-site manager. And a lot of people ended up in a situation where they wanted out of an MSM setup, and that's, that's what I'm here to talk about. So why is it hard to split up a multi-site manager site? Mostly because here's the situation. You have site A, which is created first, and site B that's created later. Which one is the master site? There's two answers to that. The EE 1.6 docs actually did a really good job of explaining it. They took it out in later versions. I think there, I can switch over to that. There we go. So the EE 1.6 doc said, the important concept in multi-site manager is that there's no master site. There's only the site you're currently viewing. When you create a new site, the preferences are copied to the new site from the site you're currently viewing. There's no like default template site. If you are in site number 5 and you make a new site, site 6 is based on 5. If you're in site 2 and you make a new site 6 is based on 2. And then of course, any changes you make to preferences in the new site only apply to that new site. And the changes to preferences include everything from like location of your themes folder to settings for spam prevention, all that sort of stuff. So, with that in mind, you've got this idea that there's no master site at all. And so if you want to split up the site, you can just copy the database and all the files onto the new server, set one server to be site A, set the other server to be site B, and you've cloned it. However, it's a lie. There is a master site. There's an assumption made in Multi-Site Manager that you can never delete site one, and I don't know why that's the case. Again, I'm going to jump to another tab here. Give me one sec. So, hope everybody can see that. Everybody's got that is following along. So as you can see, you can't check this box. You can, on site A, you can delete site B, and Expression Engine does a great job of just, removing everything that's there. But if you're on site A, or if you're on site B and you want to remove site A, you can't do it. So most people did the obvious thing, which is just leave it there. Who cares? You got site A and it's in there, and we can just ignore it. But that for people who are a little OCD, that doesn't sit very well. For people who are trying to split up content where they don't want that content to continue to exist on the new site, that can be a little frustrating. If you want to not confuse the administrators of the site with this site menu that's always here, that's something you have to do. Also, yes, you can make it so that when you log in, you go to site B directly, but this menu with site A is always going to be there, and someone's going to click it, and it can be confusing. So, if you want to actually clean it up, you want to be able to remove this site A. Why did they make it so that you can't delete site one? I think there's two reasons for that. One is kind of a technical reason, and there's kind of a meta reason. The technical reason is that in the database, things that are any table that has site specificity will have a column called site ID, and that site ID column will have the ID number for that site. I mean, this is it's pretty basic. However, I believe that at the time that MSM came out in 2007 with 1.6, obviously nothing was site aware, and so there were I believe there was functionality or subtle or not so subtle bugs that if you didn't have a site specified, it would just assume that you're using site one, and if there was no site one, it caused subtle or not so subtle bugs. Like, I think that this was a way to get this feature out the door and have maximum compatibility with what existed out there. Because we were only going from 1.5 to 1.6. And so I think that was just kind of a decision that was made at the time. I do think, and also I think it might have had something to do with the license check as well. That's just kind of I'm just throwing that out there as a theory. Who knows? The reason that I think that site one continued to be necessary, though, was because of sort of a more subtle problem, which is I don't think LSLab ever clearly defined what it meant for an add-on to be multiple site aware in their own tools as well as in add-ons. And so I think that we didn't really define like what site ID 1 would mean, or what site ID 0 would mean, or site ID 2, or if your table didn't have a column. And I think that if there had been more documentation from sort of an underlying technical view, or even just a philosophical view about what multiple site awareness should entail, I think that it would have been adopted more, and I think that that would have made it easier to understand why site 1 would always have to be there, or why site 1 could be removed. So. And then there's kind of another one, which isn't a reason, but I think that it was certainly a factor. As clever as Multi-Site Manager is, it lacks one enormous sort of area of development, which is that it's not possible in any way to move data from one site to another. Which, when you think about it, is kind of it's a little strange. I mean, it's a reasonable choice, but you don't realize that it's not there until you until it's brought to your attention. Like you can't move an entry from a channel on one site to a channel on another site. You can't move files, you can't move comments, you can't move templates. The sites are very siloed, and I think that it would have very much complicated the UI and the permissions model and lots of things if you could move data around. But I think also that part of the reason they didn't want you to delete site one was because there was often stuff like there's things in site one that you would often be referring to, and you couldn't move them out, which is a big part of what this talk is going to be about. So anyways, that's that. And there's one other thing. I couldn't find a good place to say this in the presentation. I'm just going to say it here. It was also possible to do multiple sites without using MSM itself. You can actually use Expression Engine as kind of like an overall back-end hosting tool for all of the templates and channels and whatever for a multiple set of sites. And then you can run different index pages that just reference different template groups and so forth. And some people did multiple site manager the cheap way, that way. So anyways. Okay, so where are we? We're at the part where we get to delete, where we're going to talk about how to delete a multiple site manager site one in 10 easy steps. I'm going to switch back to the main Chrome tab for that. There we go. No reason. A good place. Back to the problem. Here we go. How to delete. I had something else to say first. Great. Okay. These 10 steps are not going to work for you. I just want to be really open about that. We developed this for one particular client with one very complex set of requirements, and we're sharing that. But like this script isn't going to just work out of the box. It's not a wizard. It's just a chunky script, and I'm sharing it in a really open way with you, and hopefully it'll benefit you. This specifically doesn't cover the case where you want to keep multiple sites. This is just for keeping one site and getting rid of all the rest. All right, so step one, first step, back up your database. Do not, I mean, it's obvious, do not skip this step. When you're splitting up sites, you are definitely, you are deleting data, you're going to be deleting files, you're going to possibly run into dependencies that you weren't aware of the first time. So I'm even going to say 1A, make sure you run this on a staging site first, right? You don't want to try this live. Be careful. All of you are wise and experienced developers, but things that go without saying should actually often be said. Step two, you want to turn off the site. The reason I mention this is not that it's not obvious, but one thing that I noticed is in the latest version of Expression Engine, when you change the setting that turns off the website, it actually turns off all of the sites. So you should be aware that that when you say turn off the website, there used to be two little toggles in Expression Engine that was like turn off this site and turn off the whole Expression Engine. You definitely want to turn everything off. Step three, this one is, I'm not going to say optional, but there's kind of two places that you can do this. You want to remove anything from site A that you don't need up front, because that's just going to make it simpler to debug and have you have a smaller database, and you're just working from a more pared down starting place. But but you can also do this at the end, and and this covers certain cases where you'd want to do that as well. Step four, look in your templates for any template that uses cross-site tag attributes. So many of part of the benefit of MSM, in addition to being able to run separate sites, is that you can also call data from the other sites by using this tag that says site equals site one, site equals site A, site equals site B. As I said, channels tag and the categories tag has that flexibility. the search tag does, the embed tags do, and before you strip out all the extra sites, you want to make sure there's nothing in your current site that is going to be trying to reference things from these sites you're about to delete. So there you go. Step 5. Okay, you want to, for this part, this is where we actually use the script that cleans out the extra MSM things. So again, I'm going to switch tabs here. Let's see. Okay, so here we go. So one thing about this script, so it's a fairly simple PHP script. It's not that long. This script is not designed to be run as a template in EE. Sometimes people do their work in in EE through a template that has PHP enabled. The reason that I wouldn't do that is because first of all, you are modifying the very platform that you're running your tool on. So if you break the tool, you can't then use EE to fix it. Secondly, one of the advantages of running something within EE is that you can use EE models and so forth, which would have made this a lot easier. But we are trying to do things with site ID, and EE's models don't allow that, which like the whole reason that we have to do this as PHP is that there isn't a way to do it within Expression Engine. So therefore, we're just doing like direct database queries and so forth in here. So yeah, in order to, so this script basically goes like this. You want to make a connection to the database. You want to say which site is the one that you're trying to keep. In this case, it was site 7. You want to choose any channels that you want to keep. There might be channels from the main site that you are using on your sub-site, channels for, certain pages, photo galleries, etc., that sort of thing. So these are the channels from the main site that we wanted to keep. In the script, it said if we're trying to keep channels from the main site, we want to take those channels and we want to set them to belong to the site that we are currently currently in. So we're going to set it to be site ID 7. Most of these channels were in site 1, I think. So I'm just going to point out where this script is flawed. This site was an EE2 site, so there were some things that were specifically for EE2. And also that meant that we didn't have to take into account things that were different in the way that data was stored in EE3, 4, etc. If I was going to develop this script, I would probably write logic in here for fetching specific fields and specific categories relating to the channels that we're keeping. But instead, we just moved over all the fields and all the field groups, and then down here we moved over all the categories because it was just easier. But this was not a sophisticated this is not a sophisticated robot. This was kind of a sharp but simple tool. We also preserved file directories from site 1, again because some of those file directories were used for assets that were being used in the channel entries. This site did not have matrix installed, but another time that I was doing this, we did want to also preserve matrix columns. So that's what these little bits are. And I'll explain this bit. So the site had, as I was saying, MSM originally had the fields tied to the site. So you couldn't have a field that was cross-site, that was available cross sites. So on site 1, they had a field called body, and on site 7, they had a field called body. What this query did is it deleted any fields that shared the same name. It deleted the one that had the earlier field ID. In other words, the one that was built for site 1. So this query will almost definitely really screw up your site, but it is the right query for the script that we were using. So that's what that did. This site also was using structure, and structure really complicates things. So again, we had to preserve certain structured data that was relating to the channels that we were moving over. And so this is a little blurb about preserving stuff with channel. This doesn't solve structure. What it does is it just takes everything that's in structure in site 1 and moves it to site 7. And then it allows you, and then we went into structure and deleted the things that were no longer necessary. So there you go. This part is kind of the magic part. What it does is it says, okay, we've moved over all the stuff we want to save. Then we're going to select the tables from the current EE database. Any table that has a column called site ID, that's the one we want to focus on. So this basically looks through every table, sees if it has something called site ID, and if so, it does some work on it. So this includes like any third-party add-on, anything that is site aware will have a site ID column, and it deletes every item, every row that has site ID 1. It sets site ID 1 to it sets everything from site ID 7 to be site ID 1. And then there's this third one, which again, this is something that I would definitely do more development on, because what this does is it deletes anything that's not site ID 0 or 1. And I'll talk about why it does that in a second. But if you wanted to also save site 3 and site 19, this would be something that I would modify to say what sites are you actually keeping and which site are you setting to be site 1. The reason it ignores anything that ignores site ID 0 is that there are some things that are cross-site. For example, template partials and global variables, template variables, I guess they're called now. Those can be set to be specific to a site, and they can also be set to be non-specific and to cross all sites. So, and in that case, they have a site ID of 0. So the general idea is that if something has site ID 0, it is available to all sites. So we didn't want to delete anything that might have been cross-site. So there you go. That's it. Pretty simple script. Save some stuff, delete some stuff, and after that has run, you are not done. You're further along. All right, let me switch back to Prezo. Okay. Step 6, run the script. We usually cross our fingers at this point. You might have your own ritual. All right. Script has run, everything's working. The site will definitely not be working at this point. There's one last thing that we did manually, and I'm going to talk you through that. So this is because we talked about how the preferences were set to be site specific. So there's a table called EXP sites, and EXP sites has a number of columns, and those columns have different types of preferences. There's template preferences, member preferences, not member groups, but like your member settings, which is like how long your passwords need to be and so forth. Those are site specific. There is a field that is for what site pages you have set up using the pages module, or I believe the structure module also uses that table in some weird ways. All these preferences are stored in a rather complex way. First of all, they're stored as PHP serialized data. And then that PHP serialized data is encoded into base 64. I think that the reason that it was done that way is so that the preferences can include, again, this was how Expression Engine was built from like way back at day one. And I think it was made so that the preferences could include higher level characters like UTF-8 and so forth, even if your database did not, because it was not uncommon that you would have a database that was set up to have only like Latin 1 characters or something like that. But Expression Engine was trying to avoid that. I also think maybe we're trying to do a little security by obscurity and or make it easier to escape or read values from that. I don't know. They did it. This is just how it is. Let's see. So basically, what we had to do was get the value from that field, base 64 decode it, and then modify it, because in the site pages array, it contains an array key that matches the site ID. So you have to change that from 7 to 1, and then store it back in the database. Now, as I was doing this presentation, I was like, well, why didn't we just make that a function in the hop script to do that? And I realized that what happened is, like, we spent a lot of time digging around and trying to debug and find out what the problem was. And we finally got to it and said, oh, this 7 needs to be changed to a 1. And then by that point it was fixed. So why write the code to do that? Like, we'd already fixed the site. So that's why this step is edit exp site pages manually. But if you wanted to add that to our script, I'd be okay with that too. Step 8 is just verify third-party add-ons. They should, the transfer of site ID should make them all sort of just work, but there are things about many add-ons where you might need to do a little extra work. For example, Structure actually has a button that revalidates the site ID and the MSM IDs on the pages. I know that like the comment counts might be off now, or things, because anything that is like a generated bit of data that relies on other data in the site, like that sort of stuff might need to be rebuilt. Like if you're using assets, you might need to resync to pick up the new file directories that are there, and that sort of stuff. So depending on the third-party add-on, you might need to do more work. I will say that you don't need to do any extra work that I know of in Expression Engine once that's done. So that's cool. Number 9, you want to check on your file upload directories. Some of them that we've moved over might have the same name, and you could just change the name. The bigger issue is that if you have multiple sites that were saving assets to the same directories, then you will definitely need to do some work to handle that scenario, so you don't end up with a pretty chaotic file directory situation, which we did. So that's why this step's in there. Might not apply to you. And then the last thing is turn off MSM and turn the site back on. It's the same general settings page panel, and boom, you're up and running. You did it. You made it. So final thoughts about MSM. By the time we finished working on this project, where we had to do all this divvying up and so forth, like, we were pretty frustrated with MSM and how much work it made to do this thing that we thought should be simpler. But as I was organizing the work that we did, and when I was preparing this presentation, I got kind of a new attitude towards it. I think that it's actually a pretty cool and unique part of Expression Engine. It certainly does multiple sites better than any other tool that I've used, and that includes multi-user WordPress and Drupal's whatever. I think that it has been kind of neglected because people tried it out and they ran into some frustrations with it. I don't know if they're going to keep MSM around, because it is a complex additional layer. But if they do keep it around, I think that it does add a tremendous value to the tool. And I think that with some additional functionality and fixes, I think that they could sort of breathe new life into it and make it be a more common part of our experience. I especially think with the switch from member groups to roles, that is something that makes a lot more sense from a MSM point of view, where you might have one role on one site and another role on another site, and an easier interface to handle that all. So that's kind of the main presentation. I'm going to take some questions now. The first question that I have is actually from myself. What would I actually do to improve multi-site manager? For one thing that we ran into a lot was if you try to edit something in the control panel and that content exists, but it's on another site, like if you go to edit entry 317 and entry 317 actually belongs to site 7, but you're in site 1, the error message that you get is totally useless. And it doesn't tell you what went wrong. It just makes you think that, oh my gosh, my entries disappeared. And when you're jumping between sites all the time, that's a pretty common scenario where, like you're in site 1 in this tab and you're in site 3 in that tab, and then you go to edit the entry, but it thinks you're in site 3, but it doesn't give you anything helpful. I think that it should just say, oh, you're trying to edit something that's in another site. I'll just take you to that other site. There you go. That's one thing. I'd love to be able to change the control panel colors so you can tell what site you're in instead of relying on just that little tiny indication at the top. And then the last thing would be when you switch from one site to another, it always takes you back to the new site's entry page, like whether it's the edit screen or the home page. And there's so many times when I want to just switch between all the sites in a row and I want to stay on the page that I'm on. Like I actually want to stay on the preference page or stay on the field editing page because I'm trying to do the same work on all the sites. I don't know. Those are small things. There you go. So that's my presentation. I appreciate you all listening. It's a little bit hard without the feedback from the room. So I hope it was useful. And if you have any other questions, let's see what they are.
Solid. So Travis, that was excellent. And we didn't have any of the questions that were not answered. There were no questions in the chat. So
good.
Anybody has any questions? Tom had a very great question. Are you willing to give him more feedback on MSM?
You don't want to open that bottle or lamp or what have you. Yeah, maybe I'm the genie in the lamp. Yeah, I've got all sorts of other suggestions for MSM too. I found a bug in it that I'd like you to fix, and I found a security hole that I was going to bring to somebody's attention. It's not a huge. It's a very small thing, but yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about that.
Any other questions from folks?
Any other questions? I do have one question. Who here has a site that is MSM right now?
I know Creative Arc has a couple. Yeah, we've got. I can think of at least one, maybe two, that have MSM.
Yeah, I don't. It's interesting. I don't know of anyone who has built a site with MSM in quite a while, and I think that's. I mean, that's anecdotal, but I also think that that's just an indication that it never continued to grow in its functionality, and it never solved the frustrations that people ran into originally. But I really, as I say, putting this presentation together, I thought that I was going to be just helping a lot of people to get out of MSM that they were kind of stuck in. And at this point, I'm like, I can see cases for using it. I can see reasons for using it. So
we have a hospital that has a couple of subsites, foundation, a press, and they use it because of the facility of having to get into one location, and they haven't expressed any of the difficulties that you were talking about. So, which is good
Yeah.
from our perspective.
Mm-hmm. I do definitely think that the one-click updating that became possible also was a good reason for MSM to be less necessary, because, as I say, originally we wanted to just be able to sort of support one code base and make sure it was clean and running smoothly. But now with Git and with the simplicity of updating, it's as easy to update 5 sites individually as one 5-site MSM. So yeah. Okay, I will give one other suggestion, which is, if MSM is going to go away, what I would replace it with is a way for Expression Engine to use another site's member repository as its member repository. That, like, if there was a simple way for site B to use site A's member data as its member data for logins and whatever, sort of like not OAuth exactly, but just like a backend, that's where you get your members from. I think that would handle a fairly large set of use cases for MSM without all the complexity of MSM for every aspect of channels and templates and all the rest. So
Can I follow up on that question?
Please.
Are you talking about a single sign-on, so that once I'm logged into Expression Engine, I can access all the sites? But would that also control your roles, or would you be expecting that you'd be using the same roles across multiple sites?
You would set up roles on the site separately, and you would inherit. I would say you would inherit. Like site A role, you would inherit. I mean, let's just invent a whole piece of functionality right here, the two of us. But yeah, I think that you would inherit a role from the main place where your member data resided, but then you would have roles specific to your site, and and that way, change your email address or change your password or whatever, that would apply to all the sites that you're working from.
Yeah, TJ mentions that he's worked on a script that does an ongoing process to keep the different member database tables synced. But TJ, they still have to log into separate accounts, or to separate URLs, right? To use the site. It's not like a single sign-on that allows you to just go to a different URL and still be signed in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a similar situation with one of our clients, ssir.org, and they use another service for all of their member information. Like it's more of a CRM, but they also, that information powers Expression Engine's member tables. And yeah, setting it up was a pain. And you can't just use an outside service, because Expression Engine needs to know stuff about members, like what their member ID is and permissions and all that sort of stuff. So there is like a syncing that has to happen. Yeah.
Yuri had a comment about a use case for, as I understand it, Yuri, a use case for MSM installation for a group that just allows them to keep adding new sites year to year. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that would be a really good use case for it. So. Yeah. Okay. The next presentation is coming up in 6 minutes. For those of you who want to jump off and grab lunch or take a break, now would be your time. Thanks everyone for letting me have a chance to chat, and you can catch me in the lounge or in our booth. We're in the expo as well. So, all right.
Thanks everyone.
Bye all.
Well done, Travis.
Thanks.